recording.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the first podcast edition of the M&P Sports Show, Concordia's former longest-running radio show, now a podcast, and this is our first edition, hopefully of many, and a lot has happened since we did a show last. But as always, Chris Milz here with Alex Patt, and we have Eric Nemchak joining us once again. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you for having me.
And, just a lot has happened.
Well, think about it. We graduated in early May, and since then, some very historical championships have been won. Some players have gone elsewhere.
And let nothing distract you from the fact that the Warriors have blown a 3-1 lead.
And the Indians.
Let's
not forget them.
I'm a little too happy about that, though. I hate the Indians, but that's just personal.
Well, I was happy for obvious reasons.
Well, that's obvious.
But we'll get to that eventually. So, I don't know, guys. What's hot right now? What do you guys want to start with?
Well, if we can talk about hot garbage and talk about the NBA Central and the Eastern Conference in general.
Yeah, that is.
Pretty garbage.
Pretty garbage, to say the least. I mean, you have me and Eric here who are Bulls fans, and you have Chris here as a Pistons fan, and inconsistency to say the least, right, guys?
Yeah, and it's kind of strange. As a Pistons fan, given what they did last year and the improvements that Stan Van Gundy made into this year, I thought it'd be a little more consistently good.
Yeah, I thought you guys would be better too, honestly.
The biggest thing came when Jackson missed the first about 2 months of the season with knee issues and that kind of thing. And I thought, okay, that'll be interesting. The first game in Toronto looked awful, and I just thought, oh my God, what is happening here? And then I went to opening night, inadvertently, the last opening night at the Palace.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And the team looks pretty good. Granted, they were playing Orlando, so not much. But so far right now, they sit at 15 and 19, 11th in the East, which still doesn't have them out of anything. I mean, the Central is very close in that regard, except for Cleveland.
They have parity, we'll put it that way.
Yeah,
parity is a good way to put it.
But this Pistons team, when Reggie Jackson came back, they were playing pretty well with Ish Smith running the point. I thought, okay, this is great. When Jackson comes back, oh, hot damn, this is going to be great. But it's just been inconsistent. I mean, their last 3 games, it's a team that has hung with the Golden State Warriors, led them for good parts of the game. Then they came back and beat Cleveland 2 days later. Granted, they didn't have LeBron playing, but you still had Kyrie, you still had Kevin Love, you still had Shumpert.
Right.
And then at home against Milwaukee, they forget how to play defense, and the Bucks just come in and trample all over them. I mean, and Van Gundy has tried to shake up the lineup and everything like that. I mean, Tobias Harris is now coming off of the bench in favor of John Luar at power forward, which is interesting, and it seems to have worked. Harris has looked pretty good in that time.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't know. Van Gundy is owning up to it, saying that it's on him and he's not planning on blowing the team up, to which I say, bless, because you have the pieces that you need to be good. But there's parity in the East, and then the Bulls, you guys talked to me about the same thing in the concept of completely laying an egg against Milwaukee.
Twice, and this team is a lot different than the Pistons in regards to direction, because the Pistons have a direction. The Bulls don't have a direction. Yeah, they're built not to suck. Yeah, they're not built to contend for a championship, but they're built not to suck.
They'd be built to contend for a championship if the year was 2008.
Exactly.
2008 had one of the best point guards, one of the best shooting guards in the league, and Jimmy Butler at age 12, roughly.
Right. Yeah, no, he'd be our young asset.
It'd be like Mike, you have the 12-year-old kid that comes off the bench.
Right. He's our secret weapon. No, I'm to be honest, I kind of expected this, because when they signed Wade and when they signed Rondo, it was like when they hire Fred Hoiberg, they talk about pace and space. They want to play fast, they want to pass the ball, and they want to shoot threes. So then they get guys who hold the ball, they play slow, and they don't shoot
threes.
So it's like, what are you doing? I understand, the fan base gets excited because they have these formerly great, granted Dwayne Wade can still play some ball, but they have these formerly all-star level players come in alongside Jimmy Butler, and everyone's getting all excited, but you have to keep in mind that Father Time is still undefeated. And in today's NBA, you can't field 3 starting backcourt players who can't shoot from the outside.
No, it's not going to fly.
And a team that really doesn't have any depth.
Right. The bench has been awful.
Really awful.
Of course, injuries haven't really done them any favors. Doug McDermott, I never thought I'd say this, but they kind of missed him. They missed his three-point shooting because no one else is really that good of a shooter on the team aside from maybe Nikola.
Especially not the 3.
I'm pretty sure they're dead last in and 3 points
Yeah.
in 3-point efficiency.
Yeah, I can empathize with poor 3-point shooting.
Here's something I want to bring up really quick, and Eric, you might have seen this since you work with my brother.
Yeah.
Did you hear he was cited in the Chicago Tribune by Casey Johnson?
I saw Casey Johnson quoted him in a tweet.
Yeah, he was actually quoted that in the Chicago Tribune sports section about the TNT Bulls
really?
games.
Huh.
Because
That's
Jay
funny.
started the hashtag about the TNT Bulls games, basically saying that if the Bulls are playing a good team on a hot streak on TNT, the Bulls always win. And then they go lose to an awful Lakers team or an awful Mavericks team. I mean, that's been the theme of the Bulls for years. They always play down to their competition.
You know, I think I don't know if it was your brother, maybe it was somebody else who raised this point. Are they really a good team that plays down to their competition, or are they a mediocre team that plays up to their competition?
I'm going to go with the second one
Yeah, it's not-
this year.
Yeah,
This year.
Yeah, knowing the Bulls and just knowing that roster that they have, that would make more sense than
Because
playing down.
Yeah, it's because you look at their roster. How many? Put it this way: how many individual matchups, are they winning on a night-to-night basis? You have Butler on the wing, and even that's a maybe because as great as Jimmy Butler is, he's going against Kawhi Leonard.
Yep.
He's going against LeBron James.
Yep.
Some nights that's not even a guaranteed win.
Not at all.
As far as
Right.
individual matchups go, and then Rajon Rondo hasn't even been closing games lately. It's been either Jaren Grant or Michael Carter Williams just came back, so he's been in there. But that's very alarming to me. You sign this guy who's supposed to be a veteran leader, locker room presence. He's already been suspended, by the way, for getting into it with an
I
assistant
took a
coach.
bet on how long that would take. I said about December, so...
Yeah, whoever had that, what was the date? It was like December 11th or something. Whoever had that in the pot, congratulations.
Yeah, really.
I mean,
you want some good money.
I mean, ever since the end of his time in Boston, Rondo's been basically a guaranteed attitude problem wherever he's gone.
It's
Look at him in Dallas. I mean,
Oh, Dallas, like
disaster.
Like you don't screw with Rick Carlisle.
no.
Disaster.
And then he went toe-to-toe with George Karl. Second mistake. I'm sure there were some pretty choice words in his book before they all got retracted from his time with the Kings.
Right.
But, I mean, that's another thing we can talk about in a little bit is that George Karl and his no-holds-barred approach to everything. That's been fun, but...
You want to talk about burning bridges? My
Yeah,
goodness.
but
Yeah.
with Rondo, like, if they brought him in to be, like, an example to the younger players...
Bad example.
I was going to say,
Wrong
good.
kind of
I was going to say, good God, you could not have done worse. Okay, I take it, you probably could have, but not much.
No. What's Stephon Marbury doing these days?
Playing in China, actually, I saw with the Beijing Ducks. I actually looked into that the
Oh,
other
no,
day.
good for him. Good for him.
Well, you know who's playing? I just found out when I was doing my show with Swirsky Sports. We found out that remember Marcus Teague? He's in Russia. I didn't know that.
Could have had Draymond Green.
Yeah, I know.
Tom Thibodeau wanted Draymond Green.
But we got Marcus Teague. Yep.
That's
But
pretty
that's
good.
another thing as a Bulls fan. How many they have this reputation as a team that drafts well? Not lately.
Butler's probably the last one.
That's a good pick. Marcus
Yep.
Teague not on the team anymore. Tony Snell not on the team anymore. Bobby Portis can't get off the bench. Where's Denzel Valentine been?
MIA. Just that I feel like the "Where's Denzel Valentine" tweet is tweeted every game.
Because nobody knows where he is.
Exactly.
It's a mystery. And they traded like a bazillion picks to get Doug McDermott. And
Who
he's
can't
still-
play defense.
And he's still just a bench player. He's still
Right.
a pretty one-dimensional guy.
Yep.
So if you're not adding anything through the draft and you're getting older through free agency, what are you doing?
Kinda
When they
counterintuitive.
want to say you want to get younger and more
Yeah,
athletic.
they want to get younger, more athletic. They're 24th in the league in pace. They can't shoot. Their passing has been not great. Teams know that if you just pack the paint, then the Bulls have trouble manufacturing easy points because they can't shoot.
They're not athletic enough.
No,
they're
and
not.
I don't think Fred Hoiberg is that great of a coach, but to
No.
be honest, like I said, pace and space and outside shooting. They have given him the complete antithesis of a roster. They don't give him what he wants to play with.
No, they don't.
So what are you doing?
Selling tickets with names like Wade because the Chicagoans will eat it up.
I mean, that's where I did like that Wade move, and that, well, first off, Miami didn't handle that well, from what I can understand. And then the fact that Wade, because I know there was speculation that when LeBron was in free agency, that they would potentially team up in Chicago.
Yeah, here's the thing. Here in Chicago, the talks of superstar A, B, and C coming here always happen, and then, of course, as we know, never happens.
They're
Yeah.
always plan B.
Yeah. They always say we can't get the superstar, so we'll get the thing that's close to a superstar, but not a superstar.
And that actually, because of the salary cap rules, that's actually a bad thing. Because remember the summer of 2010? Everybody remembers the summer of 2010.
Of course.
They clear all this cap space to get Wade, Flash Wade, Wade in his prime, LeBron, Chris Bosh. They end up striking out on all those guys, and they have to pay Carlos Boozer a lot of money.
Yep.
And then a few years later, they have to waste their amnesty clause on Carlos Boozer just to get him out of town. So
that screwed us. That screwed us royally.
And the same thing happened with the Ben Wallace signing.
Mm-hmm.
That took up a lot of cap space.
Yeah,
and then it took.
We were talking about that.
Yeah, looking back on that, I'm glad the Bulls paid him instead of the Pistons. He was never the same after he left Detroit.
Oh my God! And then that took a couple trades to get him out of town.
Yeah.
Because then you turned him into what? Larry Hughes and Drew Gooden, I think it was.
Yeah, sounds right.
And then you turned Larry Hughes and Drew Gooden into John Salmons and Brad Miller, which finally those expiring contracts got off the books. And then comes the summer of 2010, and then we get to do it all again.
John Salmons
and Brad Miller.
It's just a failure of long-term judgment and foresight. I don't know.
Brad Miller in the early 2000s would have been good, not when the Bulls were going after him.
Yeah, it was great. No, actually, in hindsight, John Salmons was good because he instantly plays like Mitch Richmond whenever he gets traded. So, yeah. That's the state of the Bulls right now. I think are they under 500 again, or
I think they're either under or at.
Yeah,
they're not above.
Basically, everyone in the Central is under or at 500 except for Cleveland, who's 24-7 right now.
Yeah.
I mean, like we mentioned, there's parity.
There's parity.
And the Bulls,
it's competitive.
And the Bucks, they have pieces to be good. Jabari Parker's finally turning into what he should be after injury.
But they got young athletic pieces, not old past their prime
right,
pieces.
And they're moving the right way. I mean, the Greg Monroe one is still not quite working like they wanted to. And honestly, I'm fine with that, seeing as the Pistons could have paid him and they didn't.
Right.
And they're doing just fine right now working with Marcus Morris, who I will say is probably the biggest steal that Stan Van Gundy has made in his time. I mean, you think about it, you give up a second-round draft pick for the future, and out of that you get Marcus Morris, also Reggie Bullock, who's unfortunately out with a knee issue at this point.
Right.
I mean, even then, Bullock's not like a huge KCP type guy, but he's a good role player. He can add some decent shooting.
What do you think about KCP?
I mean, I think he's starting to show his worth a little more. The offense could use a little more consistency, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Defensively, he's one of the best guards in the league. I don't think there's any way to question that.
And you need a guy like that.
Right, and I think the Pistons would do well to keep him because there's really not much you've got. I mean, Stanley Johnson is his main competition, and so far he's not living up to what he was expected to be. I mean, Stan Van Gundy, I trusted him to draft pretty well, but so far he's given Spencer Dinwiddie, who's now with the Windy City Bulls, I believe.
He's going in the wrong direction, unfortunately.
I need to get to a game, man. The Windy City Bulls.
I mean, Dinwiddie never really got his chance in Detroit, and honestly, whenever I saw him in action, he never quite earned it.
He looked pretty good in the preseason for the Bulls. I think it would have rather they kept him instead of Isaiah Cannon, but that.
Hey, he had that big three in the third game or something.
Now he can't get off the bench.
I mean, that's Stanley Johnson. He showed flashes of what he could be last year, and he's shown that a couple of times this year. But I don't know. People were saying they should have taken Justice Winslow over Johnson. I'm starting to believe that.
How much time do you give a young player? That's the question.
I mean, honestly, I'd say next year is the last chance they give Stanley Johnson. I mean, because so far, his development, people are saying, "Oh, it's going to take off. It's going to take off," and it has not taken off.
Oh.
I mean, it's gotten to the point where Darren Hilliard, the Pistons' second-round pick from last year, is seeing more floor time than Johnson is because Hilliard's playing better. And I'm glad to see that because Hilliard's actually a consistent outside shot that the Pistons can use that they lack almost everywhere else. Because Caldwell Pope wants to think he can shoot the three, and the games when he decides not to shoot it and scores otherwise are great. But the games where he goes Josh Smith style and tries to shoot them out of the games, that's where it gets bad.
From the past.
No, is he even playing right now?
Yeah, he's in China. He put up, I think, 30 3-pointers. He put up, I think, 30 or I think he put up 18 or 30 3-pointers in one game, something like that.
That guy.
And he made a very small percentage of them.
Oh, of course.
Good for him. China pays well.
It's the same thing with that. Same thing with soccer. How they lure the big names at blank check and get the names over there.
Yeah, but if you're still playing for money, that makes me wonder what you're actually doing with your money.
That's true.
Probably nothing good.
But Caldwell Pope right now, I think, is definitely the best option the Pistons have, unless Darren Hilliard all of a sudden develops into a starter overnight. Which I think he can be a good backup, and maybe he could start sometime down the line. But I think right now they would do well to give Caldwell Pope a decent contract, and if it ends up being not what they want, I'm sure there's a lot of teams that could use a fairly consistent offensive and pretty good defensive guard, and they can get some kind of return out of that. But Pistons have bigger fish to fry than that contract right now, as I've mentioned before.
Right.
Okay, question for you guys. Is there any other teams you could see making it to the finals other than Golden State and Cleveland?
I think Oklahoma City, if they can play pretty consistently, if Westbrook can lead them far enough, have a chance.
That's a lot of asking of him, though.
That's kind of a stretch.
Because Westbrook is more or less carrying that team on his back.
No, he is actually like that's so one-dimensional. You got Westbrook, and
then you have the Warriors, who are absolutely the 2K team that you strive to build.
Right.
I mean, I was talking to him about this. You saw the play, like, Green wins the tip, they lob it down court, Curry just taps it, and Durant comes down.
It's insane.
Like, it's not even fair. Like, and that's another thing that happened while we were off the air, is that Kevin Durant will now live in NBA infamy for a long time. I mean,
What you gotta do?
I mean, I can understand why he did it. I mean, people are only bashing this more than LeBron James because Durant defected to the team that he couldn't beat. And I can understand where that hate comes from, but at the same time, you're in this business to win a ring, and that gives him easily, I think, his best shot to do it in the West.
Loyalty can be overrated in sports.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
It's hard to find it.
I mean, there's several examples you could talk about that, not just in basketball, but, you know...
I mean, you look at international soccer, that's purely based on, like, where you can go to win and where you can go to get the most money. I mean, it's like you very seldom see any guy stay with one club for his entire career. Like, twice, I think, modernly, you've seen it with Manchester United with Ryan Giggs. And then there's a defender that played in Barcelona, Carlos Puyol, who was brought up through the club as a kid, stayed there, played out his whole career there, and then retired pretty quietly. But, I don't know, it's rare to see that kind of thing anywhere. I mean, the NBA, you saw it with Tim Duncan and Kobe. I mean, Kobe, I think we were on air one of the last nights that he played.
Yeah, I think we were.
And then Duncan retired over the summer. Again, so much damn things have happened ever since we've done this.
That last game that Kobe had, that was...
I mean, if you're not going to go to the playoffs, that's probably the best way
That was
to
really
go.
funny. That was really funny because down the stretch, he was taking literally every single shot.
Oh, yeah.
Classic Kobe form.
Yeah, you know, he scored 60 points, and in doing so, he sets a record for number of field goals attempted in a game. He took 50 shots. He took 50 shots.
That sounds about right. I mean, think about
Hilarious.
Every time he had the ball, he lobbed it. He never passed it.
I mean, he had like a couple years where he was decent with the assist numbers, but he was never.
Well, I mean, in
high.
that last game.
I mean, the Lakers though, without him, they do have some upside to them. Though. I mean, D'Angelo Russell and Ingram are both going to be huge for that team.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say, you were talking about like losing to a bad Lakers team. I was going to mention that earlier. Like, to be fair, the Lakers do have talent. Like Larry Nance,
but they had several of their guys not playing that night.
That's fair.
Like, you remember that game, right? When the Bulls lost to the Lakers and they were down.
I do.
Like several guys.
I was kind of laughing though because I like saw some of like a Lakers starting line. It's like all these young guys. You have like Russell, Nick Young, then you have like Randall. I think I might have seen Ingram in there, and then it's like center Timofey Mozgov. It's like, oh, that just doesn't.
That's
fit.
funny. That's funny because Timofey Mozgov was their number one target in free agency.
Right? Yeah, I noticed
I don't know
that.
if you remember, but he was signed like the minute free agency started.
I do remember that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we got our guy. Really?
Okay.
That's your
Mozgov,
guy?
okay.
That's
All
your
right.
guy. That's who you're spending all your money on.
I mean, keep in mind, a couple years ago, their guy was also Roy Hibbert.
That's true. That's true.
And I was still laughing because I remember watching a game with the Pistons in Charlotte. I think it was the same game that Drummond got ejected for elbowing Hibbert, but I was just laughing because I forgot that Hibbert was there. And the Pistons still somehow won that game, and then when they have Drummond back the next time we go to Charlotte, they completely forget how to play any kind of defense and get blown out.
Wasn't it in Indiana Hibbert had that one really good year? And after that, he was just
and that's what the Lakers base it on.
Right, yeah. I mean, that's why, you know,
I still
giving
remember,
a lot of money after career years in any sport's risky.
I still remember just laughing when Boozer went to the Lakers. It was Boozer and Hibbert, I think, in the same offseason.
Yeah. You know what's crazy to think about? That so much fun, best record, 2011 Bulls team. Taj is the only player left from that team.
Oh, my goodness.
He's the only one left.
Speaking of things that happened since we've been on the air, the Knicks have become a quote-unquote super team.
What's their record now?
Exactly.
Isn't it like hovering around like mediocre?
It's around 500.
I think. That's what I expected. I'm like, they're a super team. I'm like, no.
I mean, Rose called them a super team. I never quite believed that. I mean,
Derrick Rose says a lot of things.
In 2011,
Yeah, that
maybe,
you shouldn't
in
listen
2011, maybe you're a super team when you have Melo, and then you have,
In prime Rose.
and then also Joakim Noah still being relatively
Yeah.
efficient, and then you'd have about 12-year-old Kristaps Porzingis,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
who was still probably about 6'9", 6'10" at that time. Yeah, the Knicks are sitting one game over 500. They're at the 5th seed currently in the East. A little better than I thought they'd be, but
Not a super team.
And I believe their point differential is like almost exactly at 0. Like their definition of it.
for all good questions, we asked the folks at Basketball Reference on that. If I can find it on
All right,
here.
we'll see.
Yeah, here it is, Basketball Reference.
They're like the Rangers.
Yep, they're averaging 105 points per game. Their opponents are averaging 107 points per game. So it is.
Oh, so it's -2. All right.
It's close.
Close enough, yeah.
I mean, they're 12th in pace in the league, so middle of the pack there. I mean, what can you expect with a team that relies on both Derrick Rose and Brandon Jennings to run the game?
I mean, I know Derrick Rose is having a decent year from what I've heard. I haven't really looked at the stats much on him.
He's been
but
decent.
Yeah,
I mean, that,
not great, but not bad.
I mean, that and I know Jennings is having a decent year as well. I mean, when Van Gundy flipped him and Ilyasova for Harris, I was overjoyed for that.
That was a very good move. I really like Tobias Harris.
Yeah, he's definitely, I think, my favorite player. I like somebody I followed on somebody on Twitter I saw was talking about, oh, blow it all up, just keep Drummond and offer everybody else. I'm like, have you seen Harris?
He's a good asset, I would say.
And also with the offseason, like Van Gundy didn't make anything that was just like, oh my god. But he signed Ish Smith and John Luar pretty quickly. I mean, Smith was amazing filling in for Jackson.
Right.
And John Luar is probably my favorite addition that he's made. He's been so good. I mean, he's basically the poor man's Ryan Anderson because he wanted Anderson, but the Pistons couldn't afford that. Especially with the max deal. I mean, if you have a choice between a max deal for Andre Drummond and going after Ryan Anderson, I mean, which one are you really going to do?
That's the thing, you got to be smart with your money in the NBA.
And Drummond's going to be the cornerstone of that franchise for the future. He, Jackson, and Harris are going to be the future of that franchise. So, I think he was smart with his money there. Again, the record's not showing it, but I think they're better than this. Once they find their stride, they're going to get themselves back into it. They're too talented not to, I'll say that. And also, I was way too happy when they signed Boban Marjanovic to that contract. Like maybe it's maybe it's the fact that when I was 9, I always wanted the Pistons to have a freakishly tall guy, but.
Well, I mean, compared to us, they're all kind of freakishly tall.
Yeah,
right. I'm talking about like a 7-foot+ guy.
Yeah,
but
no, that guy's enormous.
But quite honestly, it's really by Van Gundy. It's really a smart move because Marjanovic has a skill set that, if given regular enough time, he could be good as a backup. And Aaron Baines for the Pistons has the option to opt out after this year, and he's got a skill set in which he could start elsewhere. So with that, Boban has a year to learn the system. He steps in immediately to an expanded role without a hitch. Mm-hmm. I mean, I still remember when I was there at opening night, like it got to the point in the fourth quarter where the lead was so high, and I was like, "Oh, come on, you got to put him in." Then all of a sudden, I see everybody behind the Pistons bench stand up and start to cheer. And then I see this giant guy on the end just stand up and walk down to the scorer's table. And then they put him in the game, and he's about 6 inches taller. I think it was Serge Ibaka or Vucevic that was guarding him. He's just like that much taller. They throw in the ball, and it's like 2 of my hands holding a basketball, basically for one of his.
Jeez.
And then he just turns around, hook shots it in. The whole place just erupts. He's more or less, the way I see it, the way the crowd reacts to him, he's like Darko Milicic, but with actual talent.
Brian Scalabrine.
Oh, those days were fun when he'd come in like 40-point blowouts.
Well, it was fun because the team was good.
Oh yeah, the team was great. And they were blowing every opponent out, so you could bring
right.
them in.
That was the thing with Darko. Was like whenever he got in, that was back when the Pistons were still like the best defensive team in the East.
That's kind of sad though because the draft.
Let's not talk about that.
A subtle way brought by Eric.
I've already got somebody that's going to be giving me endless shit about that. I really don't need.
You could just say who it is. It's Brad. He knows him.
Oh yeah, Brad's just going to be giving me endless shit this weekend. Like about that though, like I bought NBA 2K17 thinking, man, when they went next gen, they put in the 0304 Pistons. This is going to be awesome. And then I looked at it and I noticed Rasheed Wallace wasn't on the roster. So I looked at the starting lineup.
Wait a minute.
And I texted Brad. I said, okay, so Rasheed Wallace isn't in the lineup. So guess who's starting instead of him? And he said, oh, please tell me it's Darko. And I told him that it was, and he was just laughing at me. And I've challenged him now because Rob is going to bring another PS4 controller. I told Brad, you and I are going at it in 2K, and I'm going to single-handedly own you with Darko Milicic. Like, that's my goal now. Because I remember, like, I had NBA Live 04 when I had a PS3 that could play it. Those backward compatible.
The good old days.
And that's also a game when Darko Milicic was in the starting lineup, and he was supposed to be good before the Pistons got Rasheed Wallace.
He's your number 2 overall pick. Of course he was supposed to be good.
To be fair, I will try to defend that, though.
All right.
I mean, with that, I personally don't think he was developed quite right. I mean, because you look at what he was in Orlando and Minnesota when we had expanded time, he was serviceable. But
not a star.
I mean, not number 2 overall. Not number 2 overall good. I get that. But at the same time, Larry Brown did not give him a chance to play in any situation unless the games were too far gone.
Larry
Brown did not give him a chance, and he was very much relying on the veterans.
He's got his ways.
And then when they brought in Flip Saunders, you would think, okay, this is great. He developed some good young talent where when he was in Minnesota with Kevin Garnett, maybe he can do this with him. And then Saunders didn't give him a chance either, and Milicic vocally said, I could be good if you played me. And after that, the Pistons were like, okay, you're going to get traded.
Yeah, you can play, but it's just not going to be here.
I mean, and honestly, if he would have had like the right guidance from a coach like Larry Brown or a coach like Flip Saunders, I think he could have turned out to be better than he was. I mean, granted, people, and I still don't think that people who say the Pistons would have won like 4 or 5 titles with Carmelo were quite right.
Yeah.
Because you think about it, that Pistons team was so good because they didn't rely on a superstar.
Right.
They played a brand of team ball that the Spurs really kind of reminded me of that, which I think is why I kind of gravitated towards them as my second team. I mean, granted, you had your guys who were like borderline, who were superstars but not considered as such, with like Parker, with Ginobili, with Duncan, and now with Kawhi Leonard. But at the same time, you never had guys that really were like top tier in the NBA, talked about everywhere. And you just had a good coach at Popovich that led them. Then you had good coaches in Brown and Saunders that led those teams. They played a good brand of team ball. Like I don't think anybody on those Pistons teams, except for maybe Rip Hamilton one year, ever averaged over 20 a game.
It's funny because I think that 04 Pistons squad was the anomaly. It was, people say, "Oh, you don't need a superstar. Look at the 04 Pistons."
That era of the NBA is gone.
Long gone.
Very.
I mean, the Pistons and then like the Spurs the year after that when they took the Pistons to 7 games. Like that was like so much fun to think about it, looking at it in hindsight. Because it's Larry Brown against Popovich, 2 teams that play a really similar style of team ball. The Pistons a little more defensive, obviously, but I don't know. But if you bring in a guy like Carmelo Anthony, especially into such a defense-heavy system, that would have been really interesting. Especially because Anthony's a small forward. The Pistons had just drafted their long-term small forward a couple seasons before that in Tayshaun Prince.
I kind of wonder how Carmelo Anthony would fit in the locker room as well, because I don't know if you guys remember, but when he was first drafted, he wasn't a very good egg.
Yeah,
He took a little while to warm up to NBA professionalism.
And maybe under a coach like Larry Brown, that would have gone differently. Who knows?
Maybe because Carmelo was George Karl.
He was under George Karl. That's right. Oh man.
Which is kind of a hot topic on.
Yeah,
but
I mean, if the Pistons did want a big man, maybe they could have gone with Bosh. I don't know, but Bosh, as far as I'm aware, did not have much issue. I mean, I was only 10 at the time. I didn't really hear how he adjusted to the NBA, but
well, he was with Toronto, so nobody knows.
Right. I mean, they had Vince Carter back then, though,
which is kind of a good fit.
With that, though, I was freaking out on 2K as well because they added a bunch of old vintage teams, and a lot of these vintage teams make me feel old because I remember watching some of them growing up. Like, one of them they added was the 99-2000 Raptors, so you have the Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady team that's on there, and that's just when Vince Carter could dunk on anybody. I'm going to have so much fun playing with that team. It's not even going to be funny. But what makes you feel really old, though, is the Boston Big 3 team and the Miami Big 3 team are both vintage teams on NBA 2K.
Oh,
I'm just sitting there just like, what? I'm just feeling old.
I know. I mean, just look at when I think about, like, let's say the last time the Bulls were really good when they were the best in, the conference, like, that was already, like, 5-6 years ago. Time really goes fast.
That was already 8 to 10 years ago for me. You're preaching to the choir.
Yeah, I mean, that was the last time the Bulls had a chance at a championship because, even with the last year with Tom Thibodeau, I kind of had my doubts, and it showed. They didn't get past LeBron again, so... And every time before that, it was injuries for Rose and all the other key guys. So
that Rose ACL injury, that was against the Sixers. Remember when they were a playoff team?
Yeah, it was yeah. Game 1.
Trust the process, guys.
4 minutes. Oh, speaking of trust the process, did you see when they got the first overall pick this year that the Philadelphia fans celebrated like they won the championship? I'm like, guys, have you seen how your rebuild has gone so far? # trust the process.
To be fair, they've had some pretty bad luck with injuries with those players.
Yeah, Embiid was worse, and Embiid is now showing how worth it he was with that pick.
He's really good.
And then I was excited for January to come around again because Ben Simmons is going to be coming back. I'm excited to see him.
Ben Simmons comes back, but then can Jahlil Okafor even play? What's with his knees?
I'm not even sure with that. And then Nerlens Noel is
he's probably going to be gone. He wants a trade.
Yeah,
and that's fair because he is too talented to be getting the minutes that he's getting.
That's the example of a rebuild done incorrectly.
You're right.
Right, and honestly, I think if Simmons, they've been talking, they're going to use Simmons as their point guard. I think is the idea that they have.
That's gonna be crazy.
I mean, you'll have a 6'10" guy around the points, be like Magic Johnson, man.
The Greek freak.
Yeah, that guy's just insane.
He's so good.
He's actually a freak.
I love him and Parker, 2 of my favorite players in the league right now.
Those kind of athletic players are the ones that just destroy a non-athletic Bulls team. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's
just take them to school.
When we were in school, I would have loved to go out to Milwaukee and seen Jabari and the Freak on the floor.
Tickets there are really cheap.
And really, Milwaukee's
It's
not
a good
that
time.
far.
No, not really. It's just a fun time.
Yeah, I used to go there for Bulls-Bucks games there. It was great.
I remember thinking after the Pistons signed Josh Smith when they were supposed to be good. We saw how that went. But I remember that happened. Somebody said something like, so am I hearing you want to go to the Pistons-Bucks game in Milwaukee? I said, if it's on a weekend and it's not that expensive, sure, why not?
Yeah, those tickets are pretty cheap.
I mean, it would have been nice because, and also to be fair, when I went to the Pistons opener this year, that was my first NBA game in probably like 9 years.
Really?
I mean, and also in my defense on that, though, the Palace is really in a bad location, and I'm quite glad that they're moving.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the Detroit Pistons. They play 30, 40 minutes north of the city.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
But now from where I live, I just literally have to jump onto the interstate. I get off somewhere, go to a bar, get on a shuttle, and I'll be right downtown
Little
where
Caesar's Palace.
Like, honestly, like, I didn't like the name at first. But then, like, I know the PA announcer for the Red Wings, Eric Friney. I was getting a tour of the press box. He was telling us about the new arena. And he was talking about something called gondola seating that they have. It, like, hangs out over the lower level.
Mm-hmm.
And it's above the opposing benches. So he said the way he described it, he said you look up and you just see fans all around you. It's like the Roman Coliseum. I'm like, oh my god! I'm just like,
that's kind of cool.
I heard that. I was like, oh my god! All of a sudden, Little Caesars Arena sounds completely badass.
Oh, I'm sure it'll be a nice arena regardless of the name.
Have you seen any of the pictures of the progress on it so far?
I have. Not recently, but...
I'm going to bring these up for you, then you guys can wait a second on this. But with that, I mean, the Pistons moving downtown, they haven't played downtown in my lifetime. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a good move. I mean, everybody who lives in the northern suburbs of Detroit hates it because they're afraid of going to the city, which they have no reason to be, because where it is in Detroit is incredibly nice, at least as far as Detroit goes.
It's not like NBA owners would say, hey, let's put an arena in a bad location.
Right. I mean, where it is, it's literally like Interstate 75 runs through the city. And then you're at a place where it's like the Fox Theater, and then Ford Field and Comerica Park are both right there. You literally go across the interstate from Ford Field and Comerica Park, and Little Caesars Arena is right there. You have all four teams within.
Yeah, it's sharing with the Red Wings.
You have all four teams.
That's smart.
In the same area.
Okay, so if that's how you justify naming it Little Caesars Palace, how do the White Sox justify naming their park Guaranteed Rate Field?
That's just a bad decision.
The arrow is pointing down, just like the White Sox future.
Not anymore.
Not after the trade maybe. We can talk about those in a little bit.
But at the time, yeah.
I'm just saying.
But also here we go right now. The live webcams of Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. Let's see if I can bring this up. I mean, granted, those of you listening can't see, but if you want to look at this, just go to districtdetroit.com and you can find the live webcam. You can get a good look at those. But here's the arena interior, if it'll load for me. This is just really awkward because you guys can't see me and I'm just sitting here talking and just trying to vamp and fill in time.
You're doing a good job.
Well,
keep it up.
Well, thank you. It's good to know. But anyway, this is the current interior of the arena.
Oh, so it's taking shape.
Quite a bit. Oh, here's a panorama of it so you can really get a view of it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like the seat aisles are pretty much all in there.
Yeah, all the seating is in there. I mean, they honored the 96, 97 Wings team, so all the veterans, all those old players got a walkthrough of the arena. The current players got a walkthrough a while ago. But everything of it, though, is really coming together. The outside of it as well is looking very much like an actual building now. And
they're just tearing down the Joe Louis Arena, right?
The Joe Louis Arena is getting torn down. The land that it sits on is going over to creditors as part of the Detroit bankruptcy settlement.
Makes sense.
But the thing I hated with that, though... Oh, yeah, sure. Here's the outside. But the inside ones, those are the real money shots. So I would have been able to get away with that kind of thing at Concordia. Maybe this is kind of the lower bowl. I'm not entirely sure how to